I never thought I'd be back in Boston under these circumstances. That passing last month still felt surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. The lawyer's call about the inheritance came just as I was starting to get my head above water again. Your father left you the house, Michael, Mr. Peterson had said, his voice steady but gentle. It's all yours now. Standing in front of the old Victorian on Maple Street, I felt a strange mixture of grief and nostalgia was over me. This place had been my entire childhood world before the divorce, before Mom met Richard, before everything changed. The red brick facade with its white trim looked exactly as I remembered it, though perhaps a bit more weathered around the edges, kind of like how I felt. I fumbled with the old brass key, my hand trembling slightly. The lock clicked, and the familiar creak of the door brought a flood of memories. Dad teaching me to ride my bike in the driveway. Building model airplanes in the garage. Late nights talking about everything and nothing in the kitchen. Home sweet home, I whispered to no one in particular. The foyer smelled of old books and the faint trace of Dad's pipe tobacco, as scented no anywhere. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the bay windows. I ran my fingers along the banister of the staircase, remembering how you said to slide down it as a kid despite Dad's half-hearted protests. You're going to break your neck one of these days, Mickey, I'd say, trying to sound stern but unable to hide his smile. I wandered through each room like a tourist in my own past. The living room with its worn leather sofa where we'd watch Red Sox games. The study with bookshelves that reached the ceiling, filled with Dad's collection of history books and nautical maps. I'd been obsessed with the maritime history of New England, especially the old whaling ships that once sailed from harbors not far from here. In the kitchen, I found a coffee mug in the sink. It hit me hard that this was probably the last cup of coffee Dad ever made. I picked it up, noticing the ring of dried coffee at the bottom. I couldn't bring myself to wash it yet. Upstairs, Dad's bedroom was neat as always. Military corners on the bed, some habits from his Navy days never left him. His reading glasses were on the nightstand next to a dog-eared copy of Moby Dick. He sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the book, a bookmark still holding his place about 3/4 stroke. I'd never finished it now. I'll read it for you, Dad, he said to the empty room, my voice cracking. The guest room, my old bedroom, was largely unchanged. Dad had kept most of my things exactly as I'd left them when he went off to college 15 years ago. Pennants on the wall, trophies from high school baseball, even some old comic books stacked on the desk. It was like a museum exhibit of my younger self. As the day faded into evening, I ordered pizza from Antonio's, Dad's favorite place, and I ate on the back porch. The old swing creaked as I rocked back and forth, looking out at the small backyard where we used to grill in the summers. The maple tree in the corner had grown massive over the years, its branches now stretching over most of the yard. That night, I slept in my old bed, surrounded by the ghosts of my childhood. Despite the familiarity, something felt off. Maybe it was just the absence of Dad's footsteps in the hallway or his deep laugh echoing through the house. Or maybe it was something else. In the morning, I started going through Dad's papers in the study. The lawyer had mentioned something about property taxes being paid up, but he wanted to make sure everything was in order. As he sorted through folders and envelopes, he found strange notes about recent disputes. Letters from Mom and Richard demanding meetings. Thinly veiled threats about resolving the situation. One note, dated just 3 weeks before Dad died, read, Richard came by again. Claims the verbal agreement gives him rights to the property. Told him to speak to my lawyer. Martha should know better than to support this nonsense. Martha, my mother. What was she doing getting involved in this? She and Dad had been divorced for 20 years. And what, verbal agreement, was Richard talking about? Dad had inherited this house from his parents. It had been in the Sullivan family for generations. He was still puzzling over this when he noticed small things out of place. A drawer that should have been locked was slightly open. Files that seem to have been rifled through. Had someone been in here since that died? The doorbell rang, startling me. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Connolly from next door, holding a casserole dish. "Oh, Michael, it's so good to see you," she said when he opened the door. Her Irish accent was still strong despite decades in Boston. "I'm so sorry about your father. He was a good man." "Thanks, Mrs. Connolly. It's good to see you too." She handed me the dish. Shepherd's pie. "Your father always liked it." As she turned to leave, she paused. "I should mention, that stepfather of yours has been coming around. Letting himself in with a key. I didn't think it right, but wasn't my place to say anything." My blood ran cold. "Richard has been in the house?" She nodded. "Several times since your father passed. Last time was just yesterday. Brought your mother on the too. They were carrying papers around. I thanked her for the information and the food, then closed the door, my mind racing. Why would Richard have a key? And what were he and Mom looking for?" The sense of uneasiness felt since arriving suddenly at a focus. Dad's notes, the disturbed files, Richard's visits, something wasn't right. And he had a feeling he'd find out what's on and off. He spent the morning changing the locks. The hardware store on Cambridge Street hadn't changed much since he was a kid, still the same cluttered aisles and smell of sawdust. The owner, Mr. Donahue, even remembered me. "Sullivan's boy, right? Sorry about your old man." "Solid fellow, he was." Back at the house, he had just finished with the back door when he heard the unmistakable sound of a key trying to turn in the front lock. Then the doorknob rattling, followed by pounding. "What the hell?" a familiar voice bellowed from outside. "Richard." I took a deep breath and walked to the front door, my heart hammering in my chest. Through the glass panels, I could see his tacky frame and perpetually red face. "He hadn't spotted me yet." "Looking for something?" I asked as he swung the door open. Richard's surprise lasted only a second before his face twisted with anger. "What did you do to the locks?" "Change them. Considering it's my house now, I'd say that's my right." He pushed past me into the foyer, his expensive cologne overwhelming in the small space. Richard had always dressed to impress. Today it was a tailored grey suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent in Chicago. "This is not your house," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This house belongs to your mother and me." "That's not what Dad's will says." Richard laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Your father's will don't override prior agreements." "What agreements?" I stood my ground, though my palms were sweating. Richard had always intimidated me as a teenager, the successful businessman who'd swept Mom off her feet after the divorce, always ready with criticism disguised as life advice. "Your father promised your mother this house as part of their divorce settlement." Richard was passing now, inspecting the foyer like he was already measuring for new furniture. He put it in writing but never transferred the deed. "We've been patient, but now it's time to set things right." "That's bull," he said. "Mom got the condo in Cambridge in the divorce. Dad kept this house. There was never any question about that." Richard's face reddened further. "Your father manipulated the settlement. Your mother only recently discovered the deception. 20 years later? Come on, Richard. We have documentation." His voice rose as a step closer. "Your father knew he was dying. This last minute will change was his final attempt to cheat your mother out of what's rightfully hers." My anger flared. "That wasn't like that, and you know it." "What would you know? You barely visited him. Too busy with your life in Chicago to care about your old man." The accusations stand because there was some truth to it. I ante come home as often as I should have. Work, relationships, distance, all the usual excuses. But that didn't me and I didn't care. Get out, I said, pointing to the door. Now. Instead, Richard walked past me into the living room. We're not playing games here, Michael. Your mother and I have already consulted our attorney. This house is coming to us one way or another. I followed him, increasingly aware that I was losing control of the situation. You can't just walk in here, I've been walking in here plenty since your father died, he interrupted, running his hand along that bookshelf. There are some valuable first editions here. Should cover some of our legal costs. Don't touch those, he said, stepping between him and the books. Dad had spent decades building that collection. Richard's eyes narrowed. You always were a mama's boy until the divorce. Then suddenly your father called on her own. It turned you against her, you know. That's not true. Mom chose to live. She chose you. And now she's choosing to reclaim what's hers. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling her. She's walking down the street. We're going to settle this today. The thought of Mom being involved in this scheme made my stomach turn. Is she really part of this? Richard smirked. Part of it. It was her idea. While I yelled, I tried to make sense of it all. That's not as I'd suggested some kind of dispute, but I couldn't believe Mom would try to take the house. Not after all these years. Not when she knew what it meant to Dad, and to me. Martha, is here, Richard said into the phone. Yes, a chan relax. No, it's not being reasonable. Just come over. I put the phone away and fixed me with a hard stare. Your mother will be here in 5 minutes. I suggest you start packing. We're prepared to let you start through the weekend, but we want to start renovations Monday. This is insane, I said. You can't just show up and claim my inheritance. Your inheritance? Richard laughed again. Your father left you with inflated stories about his naval heroics and a house he didn't even own outright. Some legacy. I felt my hands ball into fists. No one talked about that like that. Get out, Richard. I mean it. Or what? You throw me out? He gestured to his broad frame, still imposing despite his 60-some years. I'd like to see you try. We were at an impasse, glaring at each other in the living room where I'd once watched Sunday football with Dad. The grandfather clock in the corner, a Sullivan family heirloom, ticked loudly in the silence. The crunch of tires on the gravel driveway broke the tension. Mom had arrived. Looking out the window, I saw her step out of her Mercedes. She looked older than when I'd last seen her at Christmas, more lines around her eyes, her once dark hair now completely grey. But she still carried herself with the same confidence, her back straight as she walked up the path to the front door. I went to open it before she could knock. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Michael, she finally said, her voice softer than I expected. Mom. I stepped back to let her in, not sure whether to hug her or keep my distance. What's going on? She walked past me without answering, going straight to Richard in the living room. They exchanged looks, some unspoken communication that excluded me entirely. Have you explained the situation? She asked him. It's not being cooperative, Richard replied. Mom turned to me, composing her face into an expression I recognized from childhood, patient but firm. Michael, there are things about your father's financial arrangements that you don't understand. Then explain them to me. She said. Your father and I had an agreement. This house was supposed to come to me when the divorce was finalized. Many talked it through legal technicalities, but we are it in understanding. After 20 years, you just now bringing this up? Right after he dies? We've been trying to resolve it for years, she said, her tone hardening. Your father was difficult. Now we have no choice but to move forward without his cooperation. Richard nodded. We have papers proving our claim. The will won't stand up in court. Let me see these papers, he demanded. They exchanged another look. Our attorney asked them, Mom said. Convenient. Don't take that tone with your mother, Richard stepped closer, his finger jabbing there near my face. I could smell the whiskey on his breath now. He'd been drinking, not enough to be obviously drunk, but enough to be more aggressive than usual. Richard, Mom warned, putting a hand on his arm. Let's keep this civil. But the confrontation had been brewing for too long, years of resentment from both sides finally finding an outlet. Civil? He laughed bitterly. You two show up claiming my father's house based on some mysterious papers no one can see, and you want to keep things civil? Your father was a liar, Richard spat. You think you knew him? You have no idea who he really was or what he did. That's enough, Mom said. Sharply. Tommy, she added, Michael, please. This isn't just about the house. There are complications. Things your father kept from you. What things? Stop being cryptic and just tell me. Mom looked away. It's not that simple. Richard had wandered to the fireplace, where he picked up one of that naval service photos. The great Captain Sullivan, mattered. Hero of the Ixeas. When he made to pocket the photo, something in me snapped. He leaned forward and grabbed his wrist. Put that down. For a second, we were frozen in tableau, my hand on his wrist, his face a mask of fury. Then shoved me backward, hard enough that he stumbled against the coffee table. Richard! Mom shouted. But the confrontation had crossed a line. Richard advanced on me, his face twisted with rage. I've put up with your father's delusions for years. I'm not putting up with yours. This house is ours, and you're trespassing. Mom stepped between us, her hands raised like a referee. Both of you, stop this right now. I backed away, my chest heaving. For a moment, the house was silent except for our breathing. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What's really going on here? She wouldn't meet my eyes. Michael, it's complicated. Your father made promises. There are financial considerations you don't understand. What financial considerations? Dad wasn't wealthy. He lived on his Navy pension and whatever he made from those nautical books he published. Mom and Richard exchanged another of those meaningful glances that made my skin crawl. There's insurance money, Richard said finally. A substantial policy attached to this property. The pieces started to click into place. So this isn't about some decades-old divorce agreement. This is about money. Dad dies, and suddenly you want his house because of an insurance payout. That's not fair, Mom said, but her protest sounded hollow. Isn't it? When was the last time either of you visited him? When he was in the hospital last year, who sat with him every night? Not you. Me. I flew in from Chicago and stayed for 2 weeks. Where were you? We have our own lives, Richard said dismissively. Martha doente ou her ex-husband bedside vigils. He wasn't just her ex-husband. He was my father. Mom finally looked at me directly. Yes, he was your father. And he was, I am, your mother. Remember that, Michael. There was something cold in her eyes that I'd never seen before, or maybe I'd chosen not to see. A calculation that chilled me. What's that supposed to mean? She straightened her shoulders. It means I expect you to be reasonable about this. The house is coming to us one way or another. You can make it easy or difficult. You can't be serious. Deadly serious, Richard interjected. We've already arranged for a moving company. They'll be here tomorrow. I stared at them in disbelief. You're planning to move me out? Just like that? You have your life in Chicago, Mom said, as if she were being perfectly reasonable. This is just a house. Your father is gone. There is nothing keeping you here. Except that he left it to me. Legally. In his will. Wills can be contested, Richard said with a smug smile. Especially when there are prior agreements in place. He turned back to Mom, searching for some sign of the woman who once read me bedtime stories and bandit scrapneys. Mom, please. Don't do this. For a second, something flickered in her eyes, doubt, maybe, or regret. But then she glanced at Richard, and her expression hardened again. I'm sorry, Michael. But we've made our decision. Without another word, she walked past me to the stairs. I heard her footsteps overhead, then the sound of drawers opening and closing in my old bedroom. Richard smirked. Better start packing. Or we'll do it for you. I couldn't believe this was happening. It felt like a nightmare, but the cold dread in my stomach was all too real. Following Mom upstairs, I found her methodically emptying my old dresser into a garbage bag. What are you doing? These old clothes can be donated, she said without looking up. You haven't worn them in years. That's not the point, I said, grabbing the bag from her. You can't just come in here and start throwing my things away. She yanked the bag back. These things have been collecting dust for 15 years, Michael. They're not precious heirlooms. They're mine. In my house. It's not your house, she snapped, her composure finally cracking. Your father promised it to me. I swore when we divorced that the designate once you finished college. Then I kept finding excuses. You might want to move back to Boston, you weren't settled yet, you might need a place to stay. Always about you, never about what he owed me. I stepped back, stand by her vehemence. What owed you? You left him, Mom. You walked out. Because living with him was impossible. His moods, his obsessions, his drinking into early years, you were too young to remember the worst of it. I got better. I stopped drinking. I manipulated you, she cut in, made himself the victim. Made me the villain. I shook my head. No one made you the villain. But what you're doing right now? This is pretty villainous. Her face flashed. Without another word, she appended the bag, dumping my old clothes on the floor. Then she yanked open another drawer and began flinging its contents around the room, baseball cards, school papers, childhood keepsakes scattering everywhere. Mom, stop. I tried to grab her arm, but she shook me off with surprising strength. You want these precious memories? Take them. She swept her arm across the desk, sending trophies and modeler plans crashing to the floor. Take them all. Just like you took your father's side. Just like you took this house. Downstairs, Richard called up. Martha? Everything okay up there? Mom was breathing hard, her hair coming loose from its knit bun. For a moment, she looked wild and recognizable. Everything's fine, she called back, her voice suddenly controlled again. She smoothed her hair, then looked at me with cold determination. I'll be back tomorrow with the movers. Anything left in the house will be disposed of. She brushed past me and went downstairs. He followed, still reeling from her outburst. Richard was waiting by the front door, car keys in hand. Ready? Mom nodded briskly. Tome, she said, I'm sorry it's come to this, Michael. But your father left us no choice. As they turned to leave, Richard paused. By the way, we expect the new keys when we return tomorrow. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. The door closed behind them with a quiet click that somehow felt more final than if they'd slammed it. I stood in the foyer, surrounded by my father's things, our things, feeling lost in my own childhood home. Through the window, I watched them drive away, their Mercedes sleek and predatory in the fading afternoon light. Only when they were gone did I realize I was shaking. Rage, shock, betrayal, it all coursed through me in waves that left me nauseated. I had to sit down on the stairs, my head in my hands, trying to process what had just happened. My own mother had just ransacked my room like an angry teenager. She and her husband were planning to take the house tomorrow, insurance money and all. And there seemed to be nothing I could do about it. I wasn't a lawyer. I didn't know if their claims about prior agreements held any water. M.R. Peterson, that's attorney, had seemed confident in the will, but he hadn't mentioned any disputed ownership. Had Dad kept that from him? From me. The thought that my father might have been less than honest with me was like a naive twist. Had I known this would happen when I left me the house? Was I now caught in some decades-long feud between my parents that I hadn't fully understood? Outside, the sky had darkened. I realized I'd been sitting on the stairs for nearly an hour, lost in spiraling thoughts. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from my boss in Chicago, asking when I'd be back. The normalcy of it felt absurd in the context of what had just transpired. I got up and walked through the house, trying to think clearly. If Mom and Richard returned tomorrow with movers, what could I do? Call the police? They'd see it as a family dispute, not a crime. I had the will, but if they had documents suggesting prior ownership claims, it would become a legal battle, one that could take months or years to resolve. In the kitchen, I found the card M.R. Peterson had given me. Maybe I would know what to do. But it was after hours, his office would be closed. As a stopgap measure, I started gathering the things that mattered most to me, Dad's naval medals, family photos, the small wooden box of letters he'd kept in his nightstand. If nothing else, I could prevent these treasures from being disposed of. The doorbell rang, startling me. Had they come back already? I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. It wasn't Mom or Richard. It was a police cruiser in the driveway, and the officer at the door was my father's younger brother, Uncle Jack. I hadn't even known I was in town. I opened the door, relief flooding through me at the sight of a friendly face. Uncle Jack? What are you doing here? He looked grim, still in his Boston PD uniform. MRS, Connolly called me. Said she saw Martha and that husband of hers living in Kitty Estate. Thought there might be trouble. You have no idea, I said, stepping back to let him in. Uncle Jack surveyed the living room, taking in the scattered photos and the general desera from the confrontation. With his salt and pepper hair and the same blue eyes as Dad's, it was a welcome reminder that he wasn't entirely alone in this. Tell me everything, he said, settling into Dad's armchair. I poured us about a finger of Dad's jams and recounted the day's events, Richard's intrusion, Mom's coldness, their claims about the house, and the insurance money. Jack listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding. When he finished, he let out a long sigh. Your father mentioned something about this, said Richard had been pressuring him to sign over the deed. He didn't realize Martha was in on it too. Did Dad owe them the house? Was there really some agreement from the divorce? Jack snorted. Absolutely not. Your parents' divorce was messy, but the property division was clear-cut. Martha got the Cambridge condo and her family's summer place in Gloucester. Your dad kept this house and his boat. It was all official, all documented. Then what's this about? Greed, pure and simple. Jack took a sip of whiskey. Your father's Navy insurance policy was substantial. The house was part of the collateral. When it passed, that policy matured. But it's payable to his estate, not to Martha. A chill ran down my spine. So they need the house to claim the insurance? They need you to sign over the house. Then they control the estate and could file for the insurance money. How much are we talking about? $500,000, give or take. I whistled. No wonder they were so determined. Jack set down his glass. Look, I'm no detective, but something about your father's death never sat right with me. The doctor called it a heart attack, but your father was in good health for his age. Swam every morning at day, watched what ate. What are you saying? Jack shook his head. I'm not saying anything definitive. Just, the timing is suspicious. Richard starts pushing hard for the house, and suddenly your father has a fatal heart attack? The implication was too terrible to contemplate. You think they? I think we should be careful, Jack cut me off. These people are clearly willing to go to extreme lengths for money. Don't underestimate them. I nodded, feeling sick to my stomach. Now, Jack continued, all business now, here's what we're going to do. First thing tomorrow, we're going to see Judge Callahan. She's an old friend from my academy days, and she can issue a temporary injunction preventing anyone from removing anything from this property until ownership is legally settled. Can she do that? She can and she will. Martha and Richard are trying to steamroll you because they think you don't know how to fight back. Well, they're about to find out that Sullivans don't back down easily. For the first time since Dad died, I felt a glimmer of hope. Thanks, Uncle Jack. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the station to request a patrol car past the house tonight and tomorrow. I don't trust to set you not to try something while you're sleeping. While Jack made the call, he walked to the mantelpiece and picked up the photo Richard had tried to take, Dad in his naval uniform, young and proud on the deck of his first command. I wished they were here now. I'd know exactly what to do. Jack finished his call and joined me. Your father was a good man, Michael. One of the best I've ever known. Those two, they can talk all they want about agreements and promises, but they're trying to steal what they wanted you to have. I just don't understand, Mom, he said, the head still low. How could she do this? Jack's expression darkened. Martha changed after she met Richard. Money became everything to her. The lifestyle, the status, it consumes people. They start to think they deserve more than they have, no matter who gets hit along the way. We were interrupted by the doorbell. Through the peephole, I saw two uniformed officers. That was fast, he said as he opened the door. The officers nodded respectfully to Jack. Lieutenant Sullivan, one said. Dispatch said you needed assistance? Thanks for coming, Kowalski. Rodriguez. Jack introduced me. This is my nephew, Michael. He owns this house now, but there's been a threat of unlawful entry and removal of property. We keep an eye on things, Officer Kowalski assured us. One of us will be part outside all night, and we've alerted the day shift to maintain surveillance until further notice. After they left, Jack insisted on staying over. I take the coach, he said, waving off my protests. If those two show up with movers tomorrow, I want to be here. That night, I slept fitfully, haunted by images of Mom ransacking my room and thoughts of what Jack had implied about Dad's death. Could Richard really have gone that far? And could Mom have known? Morning came with the smell of coffee. He found Jack in the kitchen, already dressed in civilian clothes, making breakfast. Hope you don't mind, he said, sliding a plate of eggs and toast my way. Force, off a bit. He always cook when he's over somewhere. Dadu said todo the same thing, he said, suddenly choked up. Jack nodded. Navy training. Sullivan men know how to fend for themselves. We ate quickly, then Jack drove us downtown to the courthouse. Judge Callahan, a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, saw us in her chambers before a regular court hours. Jack Sullivan, she said with a tight smile. Still causing trouble after all these years? Only the right kind of trouble, Your Honor, Jack replied. After hearing our situation, she didn't hesitate. This is a clear attempt at coercion and possible fraud, she said, signing the injunction with a flourish. This order prevents anyone from removing property from the premises until ownership is definitively established in court. It also bars entry to anyone not named in the current deed or will without the owner's explicit permission. What about their claims about prior agreements? He asked. Judge Callahan raised an eyebrow. If such agreements exist, they can present them in court. But verbal agreements don't override written wills, especially when there's been no challenge to the property ownership for 20 years. Back at the house, we found Officer Rodriguez still on duty, his patrol car visible from the front porch. All quiet, he reported. No sign of anyone. Jack clapped him on the shoulder. Appreciate it, Rodriguez. We've got our injunction, so you can stand down. But keep an eye out during regular patrols, will you? We were hanging the official injunction notice on the front door when a familiar Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Behind it was a large moving truck. Right on schedule, Jack muttered. Mom and Richard got out of their car, but looking taken aback by Jack's presence. A moment later, the moving truck driver approached them, clipboard in hand. MRS, Prescott, he called to Mom. We're ready when you are. Richard strode forward, all business. What's going on here? And what is that paper on the door? Jack stepped forward, somehow seeming taller and more imposing in his civilian clothes than in uniform. That, Richard, is a judicial injunction prohibiting the removal of any property from the premises pending legal resolution of ownership. Mom looked stricken. Jack? What are you doing here? Protecting my brother's wishes, he said simply. And his son's inheritance. Richard's face darkened. This is a family matter. You have no right to interfere. I'm family, Jack replied evenly. And as a law enforcement officer, I have every right to prevent what looks suspiciously like attempted theft. Theft? Richard spluttered. How dare you? Martha, tell him, but Mom was staring at the injunction, her face pale. This is signed by Judge Callahan. That's right, Jack said. And she's very interested in hearing about these late prior agreements. In court, with evidence. Not in living rooms, with threats. The moving truck driver, sensing trouble, discreetly retreated to his vehicle. Richard advanced on Jack, finger pointing. You're making a big mistake. We have a documentation, then present it to the judge, Jack cut him off. Until then, this house and everything in it stays exactly where it is. Mom finally found her voice. Michael, please. This isn't necessary. We can work this out as a family. He looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a strange calm descend. We stopped being a family when you started throwing my things onto the floor. When you chose money over your son. Her face crumpled, but Richard grabbed her arm. Don't give them the satisfaction, Martha. They want drama. We handle this through our attorney. With one last venomous look at Jack and me, steered Mom back to their car. The moving truck pulled away first, followed by the Mercedes. Well, Jack said as we watched them go, round one to the Salevens. But we both knew this was far from over. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. Jack introduced me to Diane Brennan, a Tougas Niles property attorney who took our case pro bono. She and Dad had served on the same destroyer in the Gulf War. Captain Sullivan pulled me out of the water when our launch capsized, she explained, shuffling through documents in her cramped office near the harbor. "You in my life. The least I can do is protect his legacy." Richard and Mom didn't waste time. 3 days after the confrontation, we received notice that they were contesting Dad's will. Their attorney, a sleek corporate type named Harrington, claimed they had a signed letter from Dad promising to transfer the house to Mom. "It's probably forged," Diane said blandly after reviewing the document. "The signature looks off. We request handwriting analysis." My boss in Chicago was surprisingly understanding when he explained in a dead and extended leave of absence. "Family comes first," he said. "The job will be here when you get back." I wasn't sure he wanted to go back, though. Being in Dad's house, despite the circumstances, felt right somehow. Like he was exactly where he needed to be. Jack stopped by most evenings, sometimes bringing dinner from Kelly's roast beef or Mickey's pastry. We'd sit on the back porch, eating and strategizing. Richard's got connections, a warned one night. Could have brilliant improv at court plus golf with him. We need to be prepared for that. I'd started going through Dad's papers more methodically, looking for anything that might help our case. In his study, behind a loose panel in the old roll-top desk, he found a small fireproof box. The key was tapped to the bottom of the drawer. Inside was a treasure trove, Dad's detailed journal spanning 20 years, records of every interaction with Mom and Richard regarding the house, and a thick folder labeled Insurance Investigation. "Holy shit," Jack whispered when he saw him. "Your father was building a case." The journals were eye-opening. Dad had documented Richard's skeleton pressure tactics over the years, showing up unannounced, making bold threats, even attempting to break in when Dad was in the hospital. There were entries about Mom's involvement too, how she declared crime, claiming financial hardship, trying to emotionally manipulate Dad into signing over the property. Most disturbing was the insurance folder. Dad had suspected Richard of insurance fraud in his property development business. He'd been quietly gathering evidence, planning to take it to the authorities. "This could be why," Jack said grimly, flipping through the documents. "If your father went public with this, Richard would be ruined. Maybe even face jail time. You think that's why they wanted the house so badly? To get these records?" Jack nodded. "And why the timing of your father's death is suspicious. We took everything to Diane. We immediately filed for a postponement of the probate hearing so we could properly review the evidence. She also suggested we bring in a private investigator to look deeper into Dad's death. The autopsy was pretty standard," she said. "A heart attack, no obvious signs of foul play. But there was to induce a cardiac arrest that wouldn't show up without specific toxicology tests. The thought made me sick, but I agreed. If there was even a chance that Richard had something to do with Dad's death, I wanted to know." The P, a former homicide detective named Farley, was methodical and discreet. He interviewed Dad's neighbors, his doctor, even the EMTS who responded to the 911 call. He obtained Dad's medical records and had an independent pathologist review them. Meanwhile, he was served with a restraining order. Mom claimed he was harassing her with false accusations and threatening behavior. It was laughable. He hadn't contacted her at all since the confrontation, but it meant he had to stay at least 10 yards away from her and Richard. A standard intimidation tactic, Diane assured me. They were trying to rattle you, make you look unstable. The case dragged on through summer and into fall. The leaves on the maple tree in the backyard turned brilliant red, then fell, covering the yard in a russet carpet. I found myself settling into a routine in the house, fixing things that had left undone, the squeaky step on the porch, the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom. MRS, Connolly from next door brought over apple pies and neighborhood gossip. Other neighbors, hearing about the dispute, stopped by to share stories about that and offer support. He was touched by how many people had cared about him, how much of a community had built around himself after Mom left. In October, we finally got our day in court. Judge Bryant, as Jack had warned, seemed predisposed to favor Richard and Mom. Everly glanced at our evidence of Richard's harassment campaign and dismissed that journals as hearsay. But Diane had an ace up her sleeve. She called a surprise witness, that's banker for the past 30 years, George Winters. Mr. Winters, Diane began after a was warning, can you tell the court about any conversations you had with Captain Sullivan regarding the ownership of his home on Maple Street? Winters nodded. Captain Sullivan was very clear that the house was to go to his son, Michael. In fact, he came to see me about 2 months before his death specifically to ensure his wishes would be carried out. He was worried about undue influence from his ex-wife and her husband. Did he mention any prior agreement to transfer the property to MRS, Prescott? Absolutely not. In fact, he specifically stated that there had never been any such agreement. He was quite emphatic about it. Harrington objected, claiming Winters' testimony was irrelevant, but Judge Bryant overruled him. Even a golf buddy couldn't ignore sworn testimony from a respected banker. The tide turned further when Farley's investigation yielded results. That's Coffee Mag, the one he found in the sink that first day, had tested positive for traces of a drug called Digoxin. In its doses, it could cause a heart failure that mimicked a natural heart attack. Captain Sullivan wasn't prescribed Digoxin, Farley testified. But according to pharmacy records, Richard Prescott filled a prescription for it 3 weeks before the captain's death. The courtroom erupted. Judge Bryant called for order, his face grim. Richard sat stone-faced, while Mom looked genuinely shocked, her eyes darting between her husband and me. During a recess, Harrington approached us with an offer to settle. They would drop their claim to the house if we agreed not to pursue the poisoning angle. Absolutely not, he said before Diane could respond. If Richard had anything to do with my father's death, he needs to answer for it. Back in session, the judge ruled in our favor regarding the house. The evidence clearly indicates that Captain Sullivan intended his home to pass to his son, he declared. The alleged prior agreement is not supported by credible evidence. The will stands. It was a victory, but a hollow one. The police will need to investigate the poisoning allegations, and that will take time. In the meantime, Richard and Mom were free to go, took the look the judge gave them suggested their travels were just beginning. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, tipped off about the sensational allegations. Jack shepherded me drove them to his car, but not before he caught sight of Mom standing alone near the steps. Richard nowhere to be seen. Our eyes met briefly. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. For a moment, I thought she might approach me, but then she turned away, shoulders slumped, and walked to a waiting taxi. You okay? Jack asked as we drove home. I wasn't sure how to answer. The house was mine, rightfully mine. But at what cost? Dad was gone, possibly murdered. Mom was a stranger to me now, complicit in something terrible even if she hadn't known the full extent of Richard's plans. I will be, he said finally, watching the familiar streets of Boston roll by. Eventually. Back at the house, my house now, without question, I walked through each room, touching Dad's things, feeling his presence. In the study, he sat at his desk and opened one of his journals at random. Michael turns 30 next week, he'd written. I'm so proud of the man's become, even if I don't tell him now. This house will be his someday. I hope it brings him the same peace it's brought me. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. Peace seemed a long way off, but for the first time since this began, I could imagine finding it here, in the home my father had loved and protected for me. Winter settled over Boston like a heavy blanket, snow piling on the sidewalks and transforming the neighborhood into a postcard scene. Christmas lights glowed in windows up and down Maple Street, though I couldn't bring myself to put any up. It didn't feel right, celebrating without Dad. The investigation into his death moved slowly. Richard had been questioned multiple times but hadn't been charged. His expensive legal team had created no reasonable doubt about the diaction, suggesting que combination of the evidence or alternative sources for the drug to stall the process. I'd taken a permanent leave from my job in Chicago and found work at a local publishing house specializing in maritime history. It felt fitting somehow, continuing Dad's passion for the sea and its stories. The advance he received for editing his unfinished manuscript about New England whaling captains helped cover the legal bills that kept mounting. Jack came by on Christmas Eve with a small tree and a bottle of Dad's favorite scotch. "Can't have the house looking abandoned," he said gruffly, setting up the tree in the front window. "The neighbors will talk. We decorated it with Dad's old ornaments, each one a memory, tiny sailboats he collected from ports around the world, hand-painted wooden stars he'd made in elementary school, delicate glass balls that had belonged to his mother." As we worked, Jack filled me in on the latest developments. "Richard's business is in trouble," he said. "Investors pulling out, contracts cancelled. Seems no one wants to work with a suspected murderer, even if he hasn't been charged yet." I felt a grim satisfaction at that. "And Mom?" Jack hesitated. "She's filed for divorce. Living with her sister in Marblehead." The news surprised me. Despite everything, I'd assumed Mom and Richard would stick together, united in their schemes. "Has she talked to the investigators?" "Not officially. But word is being cooperative. Might testify against him if it comes to that." I wasn't sure how to feel about that. Part of me still couldn't reconcile the matter I'd known with the woman who ransacked my room and tried to steal my inheritance. Another part wondered if she'd been manipulated by Richard all alone, caught in his web of greed and deceit. After the holidays, I received an unexpected letter, from Mom. No return address, just my name in her familiar handwriting. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. "Dear Michael," she'd written. "There are no words adequate to express my remorse for what happened. I won't insult you with excuses or explanations. What I did was unforgivable, motivated by bitterness and greed that I allowed to consume me. Your father deserved better. You deserve better. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I am cooperating fully with the investigation into your father's death. I was blind to what Richard was capable of, but I am blind no longer. The house is rightfully yours, as your father always intended. I'm sorry for trying to take that from you. With deep regret, Mom." I read it 3 times, trying to gauge its sincerity. Was it genuine remorse, or just another manipulation? I couldn't tell, and that uncertainty itself was a kind of grief, mourning the trust that had been irreparably broken. January brought a blizzard that shut down the city for 3 days. I spent the time organizing that research notes and planning renovations for the house. Some rooms needed updating, the kitchen was straight out of the años 80, and the upstairs bathroom had seen better days. But I wanted to preserve the character of the place, the history embedded in its walls. MRS, Connollyson Kevin, a contractor, helped me draw up plans. Your dad said to talk about redoing the kitchen, he told me as we measured the space. Said he was saving up to surprise you when you finally moved back to Boston. The thought brought a lump to my throat. Dad had always believed I'd come home eventually. He'd been right, just not in the way either of us had imagined. In February, nearly a year after Dad's death, there was a breakthrough. A former employee of Richard's came forward with texts proving Richard had been at Dad's house the morning he died, despite his repeated claims that he'd been at work all day. The district attorney's office moved quickly after that. Richard was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The evidence was largely circumstantial, but damning in its totality, the Ajaxin prescription, his presence at the scene, the financial motive, that's documentation of his harassment. Mam was not charged. Whether due to lack of evidence or her cooperation, I never found out. I didn't attend the arraignment or any of the preliminary hearings. I'd given my statements to the police and the DA's office, but I couldn't bear to see Richard in person, to be in the same room with the man who might have killed my father. Spring came, bringing with it a sense of renewal. The renovations on the house were progressing well. The kitchen now had new cabinets and countertops, Toki the kept that sold wooden table, the site of so many conversations over the years. Diane called one afternoon in April. Just heard from the Da, she said. Richard's taking a plea deal. Second-degree murder, 25 years. No trial? I asked, surprised. They had him cornered. His lawyer probably convinced him this was the best he'd get. And frankly, it's better for you too. No months of testimony, no appeals process dragging on for years. She was right, but part of me had wanted the trial, wanted the world to know exactly what Richard had done. There is something else, Diane continued. Your mother testified against him. Provided evidence that he'd been plotting to take the house for years. It probably helped secure the plea deal. After we went up, I sat on the back porch, watching the maple tree bud with new leaves. Dad had planted that tree the year I was born. We'd watched it grow together, marking my height against its trunk each birthday until I'd finally outgrown it. A week later, I received another letter from Mom. This one had a return address, a small apartment in Salem. She wrote that Richard had accepted a plea deal, confirming what Diane had told me. She also said she was seeing a therapist, trying to understand how she'd lost herself so completely in her marriage to him. I don't expect to be part of your life again, she wrote. But I want you to know that I'm trying to be someone who deserves to be. Someone your father would recognize. At the bottom was her phone number, but no pressure to use it. I folded the letter and put it in Dad's desk. Maybe someday I'd call her. Maybe not. The wound was still too raw to know if it could ever truly heal. In May, I hosted a memorial gathering for Dad, something he hadn't been emotionally ready for after his funeral. Friends, neighbors, former Navy colleagues all came to the house, sharing stories and laughter. It wasn't sad, not exactly. More a celebration of who had been and what had meant to so many people. Jack crashed a toast in the backyard, the maple tree in full leaf above us. To Captain James Sullivan, said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Brother, father, friend. May your memory be a blessing. To Dad, I echoed, lifting my glass. As the guests mingled, I found myself drawn to the old tire swing Dad had done from the maple tree decades ago on impulse. I sat in it, pushing off gently with my feet. The familiar creak of the rope, the sway of the swing, it brought me back to simpler times, before a betrayal and loss had complicated everything. From this vantage point, I could see the whole backyard, where Dad had taught me to throw a baseball, where we the grill stacks in the summer, where Ed sat alone on countless evenings after Mom left, finding his way forward just as he was doing now. The house was mine. Truly mine, hard-won and now being remade in a way that honored its history while creating space for a new future. My future. That evening, after everyone had gone, I went to Dad's study, my study now, and opened his journal to the last entry I'd made. Home isn't just a place, I'd written. It's a feeling of belonging, of safety. I've tried to create that for Michael here. Whatever happens, Iope finds his way home. I had found my way home, though not in the way either of us had expected. There was still pain, still healing to be done. Richard would serve his time. Mom would continue her separate journey of remorse and atonement. Andy would be here, in the house on Maple Street, building a life from the foundation my father had left me. The next morning, I called the number Mom had left in her letter. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice tentative, hopeful. Michael? Hi, Mom, he said, looking out at the maple tree, its leaves dancing in the spring breeze. I think we should talk. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Forgiveness, if it came at all, will take time. Trust, once broken, is never quite the same when mended. But as he watched a pair of cardinals build a nest in the maple tree, new life taking root in old branches, he felt something he hadn't expected to feel again so soon. Ope. Dad's house, my house now, had weathered storms before. Its foundations were strong, its history complex but enduring. Like the Sullivan men who had inhabited it, the house had a certain resilience, a capacity to adapt without losing its essential character. As summer approached, I found myself planning again, not just renovations, but my life. I'd been offered a permanent position at the publishing house. I'd made a new friends and reconnected with old ones. I'd even started dating someone, a maritime history professor I'd met through work. Home, as Dad had written, wasn't just a place. It was a feeling. And despite everything, the betrayal, the legal battles, the lingering grief, I'd found that feeling again within Tesse walls. Not exactly as it had been before, but sturdy enough to build upon. Different, but familiar. Changed, but true. The inheritance had been more than just a house. It had been a journey back to myself, to what mattered. To home.